So that was an interesting British Grand Prix, wasn't it? So I've got two things mainly that I'm going to talk about in this episode. First up, the thumbnail, the main thing that happened in the Grand Prix, which was Verstappen and Hamilton's incident on lap one. The other thing I'm going to talk about, which is actually the first thing I'm going to talk about, is the weekend sprint qualifying format. So those are going to be the two things I'm going to discuss. I'm going to have a time code probably up here somewhere on the screen for if you just want to skip straight to me talking about the Verstappen-Hamilton crash. But if you want to listen to me talk about the weekend format, I'll go ahead and talk about that right now. So the weekend sprint qualifying format, in my opinion, this was quite a good format. So if you don't know what the format was, I'll go ahead and talk about it right now. So you start off on Friday, just like you normally would with free practice 1. But instead of going to free practice 2, you then have qualifying right after that, which is the normal Q1, Q2, Q3 format. The only thing that was different is the tires you use for Q2 do not carry over to anything, so you didn't have people going out of mediums. Actually, you were only allowed to use softs in that qualifying session. That was the other different thing. So that qualifying was pretty entertaining to watch. George Russell got into Q3 by quite a bit. I think he qualified P8, and Hamilton won the pole. It's not exactly the pole. He won first starting position for the sprint race, and then Verstappen was second. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into what happened Saturday. So Saturday you had free practice 3 and then the sprint race. For the sprint race, it was a 17-lap race, so just under 100 kilometers. I think that's the limit for these sprint races, is the longest it can be is 100 kilometers. So that race went quite well. You had Max passing Lewis off the line, and then Lewis and Max kind of trying to battle, and at the end you had Lewis trying to catch Max while other people were fighting for positions in the midfield. George Russell, who I had talked about, got into Q3. He actually ended up hitting Carlos Sainz on the first lap of the sprint race, and he ended up getting a 3-place grid drop for that. He finished 9th, and then he would start 12th on Sunday. So Sunday went just as normal in terms of the schedule. It's just the race at the normal time. That was really about it for that. So I think the sprint qualifying format is good for the places they do it at. You've got, I think, tracks like Great Britain are a great place to do this. Obviously, the FIA has said tracks like Monaco wouldn't work for that. Like, qualifying is the reason people watch Monaco, so unless you can figure out some way to do 2 qualifying sessions, it's not going to be worth anything. But the FIA has said that they'd be open to kind of messing around with the weekend format a little more now that they've seen this race, or this weekend. But yeah, in my opinion, it was quite a good format. Hopefully, they're already going to end up doing it 2 other races this year. So they'll be using that format at 2 more races this year. Monza is probably going to be the first one. It hasn't yet been officially announced, but it's basically set in stone that Monza is going to be the next one. And the third one has not exactly been decided yet. There's been some talks that Interlagos could have that, though we don't know at the moment. So let's go ahead and talk about that incident. So on lap 1, Lewis Hamilton was desperate to try to pass Max Verstappen after he had started on pole. He had made a couple of lunges into a couple of corners that ended up not yielding anything. And by the time they got halfway around the lap, they were at Copse Corner. Now, Lewis Hamilton decided going down the straight before Copse Corner, he looked outside originally and then went back up to the inside of Max Verstappen. Now, Verstappen was already quite close to the wall here, so they had to swing back out wide before the corner. And then coming into the corner, Max had turned in trying to make the corner, and Lewis, who was just a little bit behind Verstappen, was a little bit off the apex and didn't leave a lot of room for Max. And in somewhat of a racing incident, Max ended up getting sent off and into the barrier. He actually had to go to the hospital to get checked, but it turns out there's nothing. He's not hurt in any way, so that's good. I'm going to go ahead and give a little more in-depth analysis of this crash here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this incident in super slow motion. So first thing that happens is Lewis is going to look outside and Max turns inside to try to cover the bottom. Now Lewis is going to try to turn back inside to go even further low. And there's not a lot of space there, probably just a bit more than a car width there. And it's really quite a tight spot. Now this leaves both of them quite close to the wall, so they'll get a shallow entry into a really fast corner, which really isn't going to help anything. So they both try to turn wide to make the corner better, especially Verstappen. Now Lewis stays quite close to the wall here. So coming into the corner, Lewis misses the apex here by probably half or 3/4 of the car width, and Verstappen starts turning in, assuming that Lewis is going to be on the apex like normal, and Lewis obviously had missed it by quite a lot. They make contact, and Max gets sent off into the shadow realm in the runoff area. This ended up bringing out a red flag, and yeah. So, what are my opinions on this? Well, first of all, I think it's Lewis's fault. There's no question here. He tried to send it up into the inside of a very, very fast corner. One of the fastest proper corners in all of F1. And he shouldn't have expected it to work. Especially a 7-time champion like Lewis should know that you don't send it up the inside into a corner like that and expect both cars to come out at the exit of the corner. So why did he do this? Well, first up, the main thing is that the Red Bulls were fast in the next section of corners, which are Maggots and Beckett's, and especially with the dirty air from being behind the Red Bull, it would have made it so that Lewis probably would have been more than a second behind Verstappen coming out into the hangar straight, and he would have been out of DRS range for when that came on in 2 laps. Copse Corner was really Lewis's last chance to pass Verstappen in the first couple of laps of the race, and he, after the first couple of corners where he hadn't made any major moves, he kind of probably felt desperate to make a move before he got to there, because he probably knew that if you got past Copse Corner, you weren't going to have a chance at passing Verstappen. So clearly Lewis needed to make a move quickly. So that's probably why he made that move. But again, he should know that's not a move that's going to work. There are better places to pass, and if worst comes to worst, you can just wait and try to get him on pit stop sequences or something, because that move was not only dangerous for Verstappen, but Lewis could have crashed as well. He had gotten damaged that without the red flag, he probably would have had to retire. So this was a very, very dangerous move that definitely could have cost Lewis even more championship points and probably even the championship if the red flag hadn't came out. So the penalty, obviously, in my opinion, Lewis just punted Verstappen. So what penalty should he get? I think the 10-second penalty, especially under the context that he came back and won the race still and Verstappen got no points, the penalty should have been harsher. You don't get to punt your championship rival and send him to the hospital, literally, and then just win the race with like a slap on the wrist penalty. This should be something he's getting penalty points on his license and stuff like that. And to my knowledge, he is not getting any of that. My opinion on the penalty is that it probably should have been a drive-through or a stop-and-go or something, because I think calling for disqualification is a bit harsh because it wasn't intentional, we think, but it didn't look intentional. If it was intentional, yeah, he should be disqualified, but it wasn't intentional. It was just a stupid move that he should have known wasn't going to work. In my opinion, the drive-through is probably warranted, because that would hurt him way more than the 10-second penalty he got. Obviously, that would have costed him the win. Leclerc would have ended up winning, probably. But that also would have cost him places on the podium, so he wouldn't have gotten the 25 points that he got, or really even close. He would have been much further back down the field, also because he would have had to pass more cars to get up there. It would have hurt him much more, but not also completely ruined everything and made it not worth even showing up. I think that the stop-and-go penalty probably would have been worth the most. Now, talking about disqualification, like I said, it wasn't intentional. There's been people calling for Lewis to get a race ban. citing the Roman Grosjean crash at Spa in 2012. I don't think so. The current penalty points system for license, like FIA license stuff, doesn't even allow for that. I don't think you're allowed to just get banned from the next race. So I don't even think it would be worth doing that, even if you could. But I just think it was a stupid move that Lewis should have known wasn't going to work. But, I mean, he was kind of desperate at that point because the Mercedes were much slower through the next section of corners. So last thing I'm going to talk about is the comparisons people have been making with 1989, 1994, and 1997. If you don't know, that was Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna. Well, that was in 1999, 1989, it was Ayrton Senna intentionally crashing his teammates to win the championship. In 1994, Michael Schumacher crashed Damon Hill. And in 1997, Michael Schumacher crashed Jacques Villeneuve. In my opinion, no, they're not at all the same. All those were in the last couple of races with the direct intent of crashing them to win the championship. It didn't look like Lewis did it intentionally, and there's not really a big reason to think that Lewis would have done it intentionally because Lewis is down in the championship. It's not like he was up in the championship and trying to, like, take out Verstappen, and even if it meant crashing himself. That wasn't what that was. There's big differences. We're in July versus the last couple of races of the season. Hamilton's in second in the standings, and all those crashes were at low-speed corners that aren't dangerous, and this was a corner that was quite dangerous to try to attempt a move like that, and I don't think Lewis would have any intent of doing anything like that that could easily hurt or kill a driver. I don't think anyone would do that. So comparisons to all the crashes in the late 90s, just they aren't warranted. It's not the same. Like, it's not even worth comparing. I don't know. If you guys have opinions on this, tell me down in the comments. Yeah, this will be interesting for the championship fight. Verstappen is still ahead. Verstappen's still ahead by 8 points. So it's not like he's going to lose the championship or anything because of this. If anything, it makes the championship battle better, just not in a desirable way. I really wish that it would have been Verstappen just having a bad race and Lewis going out and winning, and we don't have to talk about all this stuff. But when controversial stuff comes up, we've got to discuss it. So, I think in the end, Lewis and Max are both great drivers. Lewis just made a mistake and really didn't get like as bad of an outcome as he probably should have gotten. So that's really my opinion on that. Overall, I think the race was okay. Obviously, in my opinion, it sucks that Leclerc didn't win because it would have been cool to see a Ferrari winning again. 2019 seems like, I mean, it seems like forever ago, obviously, since last year's debacle with Ferrari. But, yeah, I wish Leclerc would have won, but I'm not going to do a full race review type thing because I guess we've got other stuff to talk about. So that's really about all I have. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I will see you all probably Friday for this week in racing, or this week's racing news, sorry. But if not, it'll probably, if there's something major that comes up this week for like news stuff or whatever, I'll make a video about that. But that's about all I have. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I will see you all then. Bye.